girls' school. Both the girls' contingent haven't arrived. However, we'll start. Mr. Audrey Bhattacharya, members of the Board of Governors, Mr. Peter Collins, Vice Principal, La Martiniere College, Mr. Sarkar, esteemed guests, teachers, boys and girls. It is my distinct pleasure to extend a very warm welcome to our 74th Inter-Martiniere debate. I deem it a great privilege to welcome our chief guest and chairperson of the debate, a learned personality of vision and action. Allow me to formally introduce him. Mr. Audrey Bhattacharya is currently the Principal Secretary, Tourism, West Bengal. He started his IS career as SDO Diamond Harbour, then went on to work in the districts in industrial development and in information and culture, and then joining as the Home Secretary, West Bengal. He loves traveling, and so tourism portfolio is his passion. As Principal Secretary, Tourism, he has just got the Durga Puja on the world map. What was unthinkable even a year back, Nat Geo recently telecast a 1-hour show on this festival a number of times, the biggest festival in the world, as Mr. Bhattacharya perceives it. As a student of St. Columba, Delhi, Don Bosco and St. Xavier's College, Kolkata, and later Delhi University, he is extremely fond of writing, having won a gold medal twice from none other than the then Prime Minister, Srimati Indira Gandhi, while still in school. An enthusiastic quizzer, participated in Radio Bonvita quiz contest in school, Siddharth Basu's quiz time and SARC quiz on national television in college, Mastermind on BBC twice, and several other quizzes at national and international levels. He is also the mentor of Kolkata Quiz Festival that is held annually. He currently prefers to be a quiz master though. Dabbled in modeling, acted in films and plays, and have produced and directed several plays as a student. A music lover, extremely fond of R.D. Burman, Kishore Kumar, Gulzar, Simon and Garfunkel, and also Billy Joel. An avid traveler and photographer, having covered more than 40 countries, an adventurous foodie, has written various articles on travel and food for leading journals, both national and international. Latest passion is cooking exotic and innovative recipes. Recently, he reached the final round of national cookery show, MasterChef. He would rather be a homemaker than a bureaucrat. Sir, it is indeed a pleasure and honor to have you amidst us, and your presence is greatly valued and a joy for us. And we would like to felicitate you in the traditional La Martiniere way. We are indeed delighted to have amidst us the Vice Principal from Lucknow School, Mr. Collins, and we wish to welcome him in the traditional La Martiniere way. We are awaiting Mrs. Das, the Lady Principal from Lucknow. We could welcome her later. We are also privileged to have with us retired Justice Inderjit Chatterjee and retired Justice Siddharth Chattopadhyay, and we also welcome them in the traditional La Martiniere way. We are also pleased to have Dr. Mrs. Kaveri Chatterjee as our special invitee, and we wish to welcome her also in the traditional La Martiniere way. I would now like to hand over the proceedings for the evening to the chairperson, Mr. Audrey Bhattacharya.
Good evening. I must thank Mr. Rafi and everybody at La Martiniere for this honor. Many, many years ago, I used to watch, I think I watched one debate, but as a member of an enemy camp. It is my pleasant duty to now introduce the judges for the debate. Our first judge, Dr. Chandrani Vishwash, an associate professor in the Department of English, St. Xavier's College, Autonomous, and visiting professor at the Department of English, St. Xavier's University. She has served as head of department at St. Xavier's College from 2009 to 2013. Her research interests include women's writings in the African and African American traditions, black feminism, modern fiction, and translation studies. Professor Vishwash has presented papers and chaired sessions at innumerable national and international conferences, and has several articles to her credit in journals and anthologies of repute. Her book, Woman and War, published by Books Plus, has been critically acclaimed and taught in various Indian universities. She has also been a visiting faculty in the Department of English, Center for Language, Literature and Culture Studies, School of Languages, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and in the Department of English, University of Kolkata. Dr. Vishwash is a life member of the Jadavpur University Society for American Studies. Welcome, Dr. Vishwash. Our next judge, Srimati Shanta Pal, who is Associate Professor, Department of English, Scottish Church College. She is actively engaged in the rescue, care and rehabilitation of injured animals and birds. She is also involved in afforestation and wildlife conservation. She's a member of the award-winning team for the documentary Sundarban, It's Not About Tigers Only, at the Kolkata International Wildlife Film Festival 2017. Welcome, Srimati Pal. And our third judge is an old friend, Mr. Snehashi Shur, a senior TV journalist in Doordarshan for more than 3 decades, with experience in print and radio, and empaneled media trainer of Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union, guest faculty in Calcutta, Jadavpur, Bardhaman, Vishwabharati, and St. Xavier's Universities, and in the Indian Institute of Mass Communication and the National Academy of Broadcasting and Multimedia, Odisha. He has covered several important assignments in India and abroad and accompanied the Prime Minister of India on foreign visits. Apart from West Bengal, he has covered conflicts in all the northeastern states and in Jammu and Kashmir. He did his MA in journalism from Calcutta University, PG diploma in media law from Nalsar, Hyderabad, and PG diploma in public relations from Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. Currently, the president of the Press Club, Kolkata, for 2 consecutive terms, and also the honorary secretary of the St. Xavier's College, Calcutta Alumni Association. So there's a strong St. Xavier's connect here, and the third. He has edited a number of prestigious publications and received many awards for excellence in journalism. Welcome, Mr. Su. I am now supposed to introduce the topic. However, the rules of confidentiality are so well preserved that I do not know the topic myself. If somebody could enlighten me. In the absence of a topic, which I presume the debaters know, it might be prudent to call the debaters on stage. So, It's here on the debaters list. So the topic is uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. That's a lot of very long words, but I guess we understand it. Okay. And it is now my very pleasant duty to call on stage the two teams for and against. For the motion, the host team, La Martiniere for Boys, Kolkata, and on stage we shall have Mayur Bajaj. Where are you, Mayur? Mayur Bajaj, Rishabh Chaudhary, Mohan Rajagopal, and finally Shaurya Bansal, who is the fourth speaker. So that's a welcome for the home team. Opposing the motion, we have La Martiniere for Boys, Lucknow. I think we need a little more applause for the visitors. Okay, they are represented by Atirek Bajpai, Niloy Roy Chaudhary, Rajbir Singh Bisht, and the fourth member, Aryan Ahuja. Welcome. May the best team win. And the topic once again is uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. Now, if you gentlemen will take your seats, I think we can start the debate if the judges and the timekeepers are ready. But first, I am supposed to read out the rules, which are fairly voluminous. So, that's not nice, but that's very good. Okay, so you're going to exchange pennants? Is that what you call them? So, La Martiniere, Calcutta, and La Martiniere, Lucknow. We'll exchange pennants. Gentlemen? So, the rules. So there will be an opening speaker for the motion, opening speaker against the motion. The opening speakers will speak, I think, for 3 plus 2 minutes. Sorry, 4 plus 1 minute. 4 minutes, a bell sounds for time, and 1 more minute. The other two speakers will speak for 3 minutes plus 1 minute. After each speaker has finished, there will be 2 minutes for questions. The questions are better, phrased very briefly, and there will be only 2 questions for each speaker. After the 3 speakers from each team have finished, first the leader of the opposition and then the leader of the proposition will sum up their team's arguments. Thereafter, the fourth speaker on each side will also speak. And while the first three speakers are marked individually as well as for the team, the fourth speaker only has the honor of scoring points for the team and not individually. Right? So, in brief, I can also outline for the audience the parameters for the judges, which are content, 20 points, delivery, 5 points, argument, 5 points, summing up, 10 points, and general impression of the team, 10 points. If we are all clear on that, I think we can start the debate where the topic is uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. And I would invite Mayur Bajaj, the opening speaker, to open for the motion.
Right. If I may now. So, I stand here with 5 minutes on this venerable occasion to prove to you a stance which is very intuitive, something which the modern generation can hardly disagree with. The motion under fire of today's debate reads that uniformity leads to conformity as well as mediocrity. As principal speaker of side proposition, let's lay out the definitions. Uniformity. Uniformity means a state where there's a lack of diversity in thought and action, no significant variation. Conformity is a state where the society tends to abide by certain set standards or models. They have similar attitudes towards them. And thirdly, mediocrity. Mediocrity is a state where there is minimalistic improvement over time. And this entire debate is set in the context of the society at large. Now, instead of taking the standard approach of laying out three constructives, we take as proposition a slightly different route. Given the motion today, we'll propose a thread of logic to you. What I'll start will be continued by the second speaker of proposition. I'll start off by proving the causation between uniformity and conformity, following which my second speaker will prove the link between uniformity and mediocrity, and my third speaker will prove to you why this thread remains intact while significantly negating the arguments that opposition presents. So let's start with the thread, uniformity and conformity. Now, let me pose you a question. If I ask you to differentiate between uniformity and conformity, won't you really think that these are interchangeable terms? Won't you think that uniformity will essentially guarantee conformity? Take, for example, a situation where we have a society. Every person in the society has a similar thought process, has a similar method of acting. That's uniformity. And if they have the same thought process, whatever societal model we impose on them, whatever trend we give them, they'll have the same attitude towards it. That's the prime reason why I call this conformity. They'll have the same stance towards it because there won't be any contrasting opinions in the presence of uniformity. That's why I say that uniformity guarantees conformity. Much like the way I could say that a certain swimming contingent is guaranteed to bag an award. I won't take names, but yeah, let's move on. So, I'll give you an example from history. Take, for example, the society of the 18th century, when most people tended to believe that women should not be treated as equal to men. That was a uniform belief. And that's what led to conformity. Conformity in the idea of sati. People tended to agree with the idea that we should have sati. People tended to agree with the idea that women should not be given equal education. People tended to have the idea that women don't deserve equal property rights. And it took an individual, namely Raja Ram Mohan Roy, to break the conformity. Uniformity was leading to conformity, and individualism breaks conformity. That's exactly where the first part of this thread stands intact. You need individual opinion, you need contrast to make progress happen. That's why someone really wise once said that it's always the unreasonable people who make the most amount of progress. Now, from here, I would like to lay down the foundation of the second part of our thread, the link between uniformity and mediocrity. Now, why do we even tend to evolve, ladies and gentlemen? Take, for example, our education system. We had ICSE and ISD prevailing in the education scenario for quite some time, for more than 50 years at least. And ever since its inception, we haven't really seen a paradigm shift in the way they administer education. You would note we still stick to the idea of a theoretical examination, a practical examination, spewing marks on the paper, and then go off to some college. That was mediocrity, because we were not improving the standard, and that's why most educationists believe that the ICSE and ISC often tend to hinder creativity and education and innovation. That's why we had the evolution of IBDP curriculum. That proves that the very reason we can't stick to uniformity is because it's within our DNA, it's within our process of thinking that we should evolve, we should break the trends, and that's why we can never stick to uniformity, because change is inevitable. I'm sure all of you over here agree with that, all right? Now, to conclude my speech, all I want to say is that if you want to bring about a change in society, if you want something to be better, which is if you want something to be not be mediocre, you cannot simply be uniform. You have to stand out, and once you do, you break trends and you set new standards to become excellent. And that's why we are proud to propose. Thank you.
I guess we now open to questions. But yeah. Number one.
Sir, thank you so much for that speech, sir. Sir, is there a difference between uniformity and majoritarianism in your paradigm today? If they are similar, why? If they are dissimilar, why? In which context and in which aspects? Thank you.
All right, no applause for that question, quite justifiably. Now, understand majoritarianism and the context in which it is applied. Now, if we have a society where a significant majority of the people, like say 95% plus, believe in a particular idea, that leads to uniformity. Majoritarianism can actually be applied to multiple scenarios, so you have to be a bit more specific over here. We believe that uniformity is quite interchangeable with conformity. That's one stance which stands as it is. If you want to bring a majoritarianism, you have to prove to me where exactly you tend to apply it and how exactly that's linked to the entire idea of mediocrity. Because in that question, I don't see any significant link to how majoritarianism can lead to mediocrity. Because understand that uniformity largely means that a good chunk of the society believes in a given opinion. So if you want to say that majoritarianism is indeed uniformity, well indeed, I think you can cede the motion to us. Thank you.
Any more questions? If you could state your name first. I'll mix up what's your name?
Aryan. So you in your speech mentioned the Ivy League curriculum and the education system, and then you defined mediocrity as a state where there is no improvement. Well, the Ivy League is uniform and it did improve the education system. So how does that prove that there was mediocrity?
Well, wonder what that was for, but understand that the very reason why the IBDP curriculum was introduced, because there was mediocrity. Mediocrity in the sense that creativity and innovation was being hindered. That was the primary reason why we had the IBDP curriculum coming up. And what I'm saying is that if we set a trend over here in our arguments, if the IBDP curriculum also becomes stagnant over time, we tell you logically that will evolve as well. Because if you want to compare something, say, for example, if you have one model which is already at this level, you can't really compare it to something which will come in the future. Therefore, if you compare the existing IBDP model with the ICSE model, you would see that we have improved from mediocrity because we evolved. And at a later point of time, if we have a better curriculum at this level, you would say, once again, how we have improved and bypassed mediocrity. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mayur. I would now invite Atirek Bajpai to open for the opposition.
Am I audible? A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As the principal speaker of side proposition, I take it upon my prerogative to tell you first and foremost that the topic does not say uniformity leads to conformity as well as mediocrity. The topic says uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. With that, let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, the motion for today's debate is that uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. And I take it upon my prerogative to give you the correct definition of today's terminology and prove to you that the motion today stands defeated. Let's begin with the first key term. The first key term is uniformity. Side proposition today defined uniformity as having a common principle. We couldn't agree more. Yes, a uniformity is having a common principle. It is having a standard, a set norm, and a set convention. Where they went wrong was conformity. You see, conformity and majoritarianism are very, very different things. Conformity is a compliance with this already set common principle. That is what conformity is. Complying with the uniform principle that has been set. Complying with the standard, the norm, the convention, and the common principle. That is what conformity is. Let's go on to the mediocrity term. They said that mediocrity is minimalistic improvement. It was quite surprising because mediocrity could even be defined by a mediocre person. Mediocrity is being average, end of sentence. That is what mediocrity is. No complexities involved in the definition of mediocrity because the definition of mediocrity is also pretty mediocre. Let's begin. Today, in order to elucidate my stand and substantiate my claim, I am going to take this debate in two aspects. The first aspect, how uniformity cannot ensure conformity, and the second aspect, how uniformity cannot ensure mediocrity. Let's talk about the first aspect. Uniformity and does not ensure conformity. In order for side proposition to win today's debate, what they have to tell us is that having a set principle is all that is required for us to comply with that principle. That is, the presence of a common principle is everything required for us to comply with it. Is that the case, ladies and gentlemen? Now let me tell you and prove to you how that is not the case. Let's start with the first element, which is we are human beings. There exists a difference between us, bees, insects, and ants because we don't have a hive mind. We are social beings, and by the virtue of us being social beings, we have different thought processes and we have different ideologies. Thus, we all think differently, and thus we take it upon our virtue because we have different consciousness to not comply with something and comply with something. Today, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about principles that exist. Let's talk about the Martinian spirit. That is a common principle that exists today. It is a principle that we have to conduct ourselves with dignity. We have to conduct ourselves with grace. But as it is in an Inter-Martiniere meet, we often don't do so. Does the presence of Martinian spirits guarantee that all of us follow it? It does not. And that substantiates the claim even more. Let's talk about other principles as well. Let's talk about a rebellion. A rebellion is uniformed by the principle of non-conformity. So, ladies and gentlemen, if today a principle exists that ensures to not conform with something, how can uniformity ensure conformity? Let's take on the second aspect now, which is mediocrity. Ladies and gentlemen, being mediocre is being average. It is used in a comparative sense. Something is above the bar, something is below the bar. Mediocre is the bar. Ladies and gentlemen, today, you having a common principle also doesn't ensure that you are mediocre. For example, let's talk about the Martinian spirit again. We are Martinians, we strive for excellence. We strive to not be mediocre. Ladies and gentlemen, when a principle exists that ensures that people cannot be mediocre, how can uniformity ensure mediocrity?
Ladies and gentlemen, a mediocrity or mediocre people can never be ensured by any common principle. Mediocrity is defined by the person himself, whether he strives for something or whether he is not motivated. It doesn't depend on a principle. A principle doesn't make you mediocre. You yourself decide, you yourself work, you yourself believe, and those actions, those beliefs, and those behaviors define your mediocrity. Hence, having proved to you that neither does uniformity today ensures conformity and neither does it ensures mediocrity, I am pretty sure that today this debate is not going to be something that does not stick to the conformity of psych opposition. With that, I'm very, very, very proud to propose. Thank you.
We're a little over time, I think. Okay. Questions from the House. First question from Mayur. Shaurya, sorry.
Thank you for your speech, sir. You said, and I quote, human beings are social beings and they have different thoughts and ideologies. Hence, when you're speaking about human beings being social beings, you're not referring to them as being in uniformity, and hence does that argument not fall outside the purview of today's debate?
Ladies and gentlemen, let's quote their principal speaker. Their principal speaker said, "It is in our DNA to change and evolve." He said that it is in the DNA of human beings to not be always uniform. So, ladies and gentlemen, when they themselves today are saying that we as social beings change and evolve, how can we always conform to a uniform principle? Thank you, sir.
Another question? No, we only have one question. Thank you, Atharik.
Thank you, sir.
Next, for the motion, Rishabh Chaudhary.
We humans are pentadectines. All of us have 5 fingers. Just 5 fingers.
You have 4. Starting now because you might need adjustment.
Are we good to go? Yeah. We humans are pentadectine. All of us have 5 fingers. 5 different fingers of different lengths for different purposes. Now, if all of these fingers were to be uniform, if all of them were to be the same, our hands would become inefficient, they would become mediocre. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, and my most worthy opponents. The topic placed before us reads, uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. Today's side proposition will prove to you how conformity and mediocrity are two inevitable offshoots of uniformity. We've already proved to you that uniformity ensures conformity by saying that if we adhere to the same set of principles, if we adhere to the same set of principles that are enforced upon us by society, we end up taking decisions in a similar way. This hampers our personality and this hampers individualism. Now, why is individualism important? Today, we will prove to you how individualism is the main determinant for success, how it changes you as a human being, and how it sets you apart as a great person, how it sets you apart from the crowd. Uniformity as a system of thought is poisonous. Once embedded in our mentality, uniformity scares us from thinking differently. We can never think something differently. We will be forced to believe in what everybody else believes in. Once we lose the spirit to think differently, we lose our individuality and our personality. This is what makes us mediocre. To be successful, we need to know to dream. We need to dare to think differently. Success, intelligence are results of independent thinking, which is something that uniformity specifically kills, targets, and seeks to compromise. We need vision. We need the courage to see things differently. We need the power to attempt what is considered to be unachievable, what is considered to be impossible. It is this system of thought which makes us great. What makes great men great is their uniqueness, their ability to attempt the solution to a problem in a different way. We don't remember the astrologists who believed that this earth was the center of the universe. We remember Galileo and Copernicus who proved heliocentricity. All social reformers, all scientists have the power to think differently. Let's take the example of Malala Yousafzai. Instead of accepting the norm that girls can't study, she fought against this system. She stood in the face of extreme adversity to prove her point, and now she's one of the greatest social reformers in history. We also need to understand that uniformity attacks specialization. Let's take the example of the composition of this debate team. We have 4 speakers. The first speaker proposes the motion, the second speaker gives the content, the third speaker shows us why the opposition is wrong. Now, if all of them were to be stripped of their special privileges, and if each and every one of them were to serve the same purpose, this entire debate would become mediocre. We need to understand that we have 2 choices today. We can either accept uniformity and become mediocre, or we can find our own individual system of thought and achieve success. Uniformity ensures mediocrity, and non-uniformity ensures success. Today, we completely agree with side opposition when they say that we as humans have different systems of thought. We think differently. We have our own different sets of beliefs. And we agree with you by saying that it is when this set of belief, when it is enforced upon, when it is deluded, when it is convoluted by uniformity, it is then that we become mediocre. Thank you.
Question from the opposition.
Thank you, sir, for helping opposition with your speech. Sir, you talked about Copernicus and Galileo, who break the universal principle that the earth was round, and therefore they did not conform to the universal principle which was accepted. Doesn't that prove our stand?
Sir, I hope you know that you have to prove that uniformity does not lead to mediocrity. When this universal principle did exist, when it was believed, people believed that this earth was the center of the universe. Their system of thought was mediocre. It was wrong. When Galileo and Copernicus stepped in and they proved them wrong, they challenged uniformity. They didn't give in to uniformity, and hence they were not mediocre. Thank you.
Another question?
So to quote you in your speech, you said that if we adhere to the same principle, that is conformity. So let's understand what you just said. You said that if we adhere, that means that uniformity does not ensure conformity. Therefore, one principal axis of your entire case today falls. How do you defend this in this particular context?
Sir, please read the label below your table. It says side opposition, not proposition. We are trying to prove that uniformity results in conformity. We are not trying to prove that conformity is not an offshoot of uniformity. We are trying to prove that conformity is an inevitable offshoot of uniformity, and that is why all our examples are justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishad. I would now request Niloy Raychaudhuri to speak against the motion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Niloy Roy Chaudhary, and I stand here as a member of the proposition. The topic for today's debate is uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, understand where they went wrong. What today's debate was all about was whether uniformity, which is existing already, we have to assume that the topic is telling us that uniformity, which exists already, ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. It's not about whether uniformity exists today, whether uniformity should exist today, whether conformity should exist today, and it's not about all those key points that the proposition talked about. Now, I'll give you 3 simple constructives to prove how today's motion stands defeated. The first one being how religion, using religion as an example, I can prove to you how uniformity does not ensure conformity. Now, religion is a belief in a set standard of ideologies and beliefs. And that is how the proposition defined uniformity as. So religion is a form of uniformity. Now when people in a religion form different groups, for example, in Christianity we have the Catholics, we have the Protestants. These people formed 2 different groups within that same religion which followed one ideology. Now why were these 2 different groups formed? Because these people had different ideologies and they had their own ideologies. Why did they have different ideologies? Because they did not conform to the original beliefs of that religion. Therefore, uniformity does not ensure conformity. Now, let us take the example of Islam. We have the Shias and Sunnis. Why do we have 2 different groups? because they do not conform to the original ideologies of that religion. And that is why religion does not ensure conformity. Now, coming to my second constructive, that religion does not ensure mediocrity. Now, how is that? They defined mediocrity as something which has no significant improvement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is a very false definition, because let us take the example of the Pope. The Pope is at the highest level of authority among the Catholics. He cannot have more improvement than that, because he's already at the highest level. That does not mean he's a mediocre person in that community. Let us take the example of the Catholics. We have the Pope, we have the bishops, we have the cardinals, and then we have the common Catholics. Why do we have this hierarchy of people? These people are at different levels. The uniform system of that religion itself promotes different levels of power within that religion, which proves our point that religion does not ensure mediocrity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the second speaker talked about how Copernicus and Galileo proved that the earth was not the center of the universe. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they concede by saying that, because when they say that it was a universal belief that the earth was at the center of the universe, that was the common universal belief. And when people stand up against that, when people rebel against that idea, when people come up with a different ideology, that is when they don't conform to the uniformity that already existed. And that is how uniformity does not ensure conformity. Now, coming to my third constructive, how society is dynamic and how people have changing ideologies. Let us take the example of the recent bill that was passed, the Triple Talaq bill. Earlier, people used to conform to the idea of Triple Talaq. It was a uniform belief within that religion to have that ideology. But when people started questioning it, when people started not conforming to that idea, that bill was passed where it was legally made sure that Triple Talaq became illegal. And a bill was passed. And hence, uniformity does not ensure conformity. With that, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Questions from the House? Mayur, I believe.
Thank you for your speech, sir. So since a person's approach to religion and religious principles can be diversified, how do you deem religion as a uniform thing?
Okay, sir, thank you for the question. So, at the beginning of every religion, when it was conceived, let's talk about Christianity. People believed that Jesus Christ was the only God. And they had one belief at the very beginning. And when that belief began to be diversified, when that common belief, when that common universal belief that was uniform throughout, that started having different groups and different ideologies, that is when that common universal belief, that uniformity was started to being questioned. And that is how uniformity that existed in the very beginning of that religion was not followed and was not conformed to, and hence religion does not ensure conformity. Thank you.
Thank you for your speech, sir. So in your speech, you mentioned how different religious groups such as Catholics and Protestants are. However, given the fact that they, in fact, are uniform in their ideology, they believe in their ideology, do you not contest the debate to side proposition?
Okay. Thank you, sir, for that question. So, when we say that there's a group, that, like say, there's a religion, right? We had Christianity in the beginning. Then it started to get divided between itself. What does that mean? Uniformity does not ensure conformity. It can lead to conformity sometimes. But now let me clarify what the topic means. What they have confused the topic with is that uniformity leads to conformity. But ladies and gentlemen, when we say uniformity ensures conformity, we mean that whenever there is uniformity, there is always going to be conformity. And when they say that in a particular case, uniformity might lead to conformity in some vague manner, their argument is still not proven, because their burden is to prove to us how. When there is uniformity, every single time there will be conformity. When there is uniformity, every single time there will be mediocrity. And like this, we have many examples. Let us take the example of the Jains. We have the Digambaras and the Shvetambras. In the beginning, all we believed was
in the basic idea, the main principle. But with time, people's ideologies change. As I said, society is dynamic and people's thinking change. And that is how, with time, people start to question the beliefs and they don't conform to the uniformity that existed. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mohan Rajagopal's turn to speak for the motion.
The former President of the United States of America, John F. Kennedy, once said, "The unity of freedom has never relied on the uniformity of opinion." Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me bring to your attention a commonly used phrase, think outside the box. Now, in this idiom, the box itself represents a set of uniform ideologies and thoughts, a set of stereotypical opinions that are echoed by a majority of society. Now, when is this phrase used? You use it when you wish to evoke excellence and brilliance in someone by bringing up innovative ideas and concepts. Does the very concept of this phrase does not imply the fact that uniformity to stereotype ideas and opinions leads to mediocrity in and of itself? Let me explain the motion through the realm of literature with Vijay Tandurkar's seminal work, Silence in the Court, where you have a troupe of actors presenting a microcosm of society in a small room in the context of a mock trial. In this play, you have a group of men who have extremely traditional views towards society and towards women specifically, and they are so set in their conformist ways and attitudes that the play basically morphs into a targeted persecution of a relatively innocent young woman who simply dares to defy society. They refuse to budge from their position, and they refuse to evolve from their narrow mindset. As my lead speaker has already explained, mediocrity can be viewed from the perspective that there is no scope for improvement. And in this case, you have a group of traditional men who are so set in their ways that they refuse to improve from their narrow-minded mindset. Now, let us move into the arguments presented by side opposition. In the words of the alternative rock band, the 1975, like context in a modern debate, I just took it out. And that seems to be exactly the principle which side opposition seems to be functioning on. They have presented a paradigm where there is no individuality in their world of uniformity. However, that is not what side proposition wishes to present. There are so many clashes and contradictions in their argument that they seem to present an ideal example of how actually non-uniformity can lead to mediocrity. In the first case, you have the lead speaker who came up and decided to show how, in his own words, social beings have different ideologies, and it seemed to prove that uniformity in and of itself is a concept that did not exist in the first place. Then you have the second speaker who came up and said in his very first sentence, I quote, "This debate is not about whether uniformity exists, it is a given that it is." What you see here is that the side opposition is simply confused about what they need to debate. They came up and gave an example of the Pope about how he is at the very top of his hierarchy, and hence our definition that mediocrity means that there is no scope for improvement falls flat. Understand the fact that just because he is at the top of his hierarchy job-wise, it does not mean that there is no scope for his improvement in his personal performance. Just because there is no scope for promotion, that does not mean that he can improve his own job. Coming back to the motion itself, when you look at the concept of uniformity, you see that there is a group of people who are conforming to the same ideals. You have a group of people who are at the same level. Mediocrity means that there is an average, there is no better or there is no worse. Considering a uniform society where all people have the same ideals, do you not see the very fallacy in the fact that if there is uniformity and conformity where people are at the same level, there is no scope for being better or for being worse in the first place? The very default in a uniform society is mediocrity. Lastly, I thank side opposition for giving a brilliant case of mediocrity in this debate, and here I rest my case and not my stance. Thank you.
Questions, sir?
Sir, I would ask you the simplest question possible. You talked about uniformity as a box of set principles. and then you said that it is possible you can think out of the box. The fact that you can think out of the box, doesn't that mean that you can't confirm, that is, you cannot, that uniformity does not conform, does not ensure conformity?
So understand the fact that side proposition is not trying to prove that individuality and non-conformism does not exist in the first place. You yourself have conceded to the fact that thinking outside of the box is not conforming to a set of ideals. What we have shown with this example is that it is through thinking out of the box in the first place that you have evolution, that you have progress. You don't have mediocrity anymore. Why you seem to harp on the fact that non-conformism does not exist in the first place is beyond my belief.
So your whole side today defined uniformity as having a set principle. And then you come up here and say that thinking outside the box ensures conformity. So sir, if non-uniformity ensures conformity, isn't your side conceding the whole debate today?
So I never stated that non-uniformity leads to conformity. The two statements are completely paradoxical. I genuinely don't know how to answer that question since it's not a question and doesn't stand. Thank you.
So that now may I invite Rajbir Singh Bisht to speak against the motion.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, as the third speaker for side opposition, it is my job today to state exactly where side proposition went wrong. And that means today I have a Herculean task in front of me, because there is a lot wrong with the entire argument. Now let us look at where they consider today's motion to stand. They think that they have to prove that in certain situations, uniformity leads to conformity and mediocrity. Where in case, this particular motion states that uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. And that is exactly where they go wrong. They do not understand the implication of the word ensures today. They do not understand that they have to present today a paradigm, ladies and gentlemen, wherein uniformity under all scenarios, in all cases, in all historical contexts, always leads to two things. Firstly, conformity as well as mediocrity. They talk about how it is bad to be in a uniform society. That uniformity leads to mediocrity and that is bad. That uniformity leads to conformity and that is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not what today's debate is about. It is not about whether uniformity is a good ideal or a bad ideal. Whether believing in one notion completely is a good ideal or a bad ideal. Whether it is moral or immoral. That is not the connotation of today's debate. Today's debate is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. It is about proving whether uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. It's there in the motion. But they ignore that on the case of convenience. Ladies and gentlemen, let's understand exactly what they say. They say that there was a uniform ideal, and that uniform ideal was that the Earth is at the center of the universe. They give this example, and they give the example of Galileo Galilei and Copernicus, two people who went against that particular ideal. Exactly what we say. For them, conformity means that a majority of people accept the ideal. However, that is also the definition of uniformity, and therefore they actually make sure that uniformity and conformity are one and the same, which is again a fallacy. Uniformity means having one particular ideal as central to your society, and on the other hand, conformity means that each and every single person of that society abides by that rule, abides by that ideology, by that principle. They forget that once again. They give us example after example proving how today's side opposition's case stands while they're false. And then they say that it is us who has it backwards. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give it to you in a form of an analogy. Very simply put, there is a certain statement that says that A leads to B. And then there is a statement that says A ensures B. What do we understand by today? Their causality today is completely backwards. What they think they have to prove, ladies and gentlemen, today is that there are certain situations wherein such and such happens. That is not what today's debate is about. Ladies and gentlemen, time and time we've seen them giving us very good quotes. John F. Kennedy, for example. But on the side of their constructives and their arguments, they've been completely hollow. They keep on saying, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a certain principle, and that principle leads to people believing in that principle because that principle is already believed in by society,
And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, by some leap of faith or logic, they understand today that uniformity leads to conformity. Fine, but does it ensure it? We give you example after example where uniform ideals have been diversified, wherein uniform ideals have been broken down people who did not conform. They talk about mediocrity. They define mediocrity in the wrong sense. They say that mediocrity is minimal improvement. Well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, I guess every single country over here in this world today, which is not developed, is a mediocre country. But that is what the case is about. It is mediocrity means an average country, an average individual, an average principle. They forget that. They forget their normal English dictionaries in this case, ladies and gentlemen, and for convenience sake, once again, they twist and turn the definition of a very simple word, of a very simple connotation into something else. And that does not work out for them. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is now pretty true and pretty clear to this particular house that today's side proposition has been actually given us example after example, principle after principle, and constructive after constructive, why today's motion actually falls and why it does not stand. Their argument today is backwards and their definitions today are false. And I hope the House realizes this. Thank you so much.
20 seconds, sir. Now, questions from the House.
Thank you for your speech, sir. Sir, a very simple question to you, as on the example by your second speaker. Given how Catholics and Protestants do exist, do the Catholics not have a uniform ideology and a uniform belief?
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to give you a little theology lesson, at least to the best of my opinion and the best of my knowledge. Let us understand that Catholicism is not one particular ideal in itself. It has various diversities. And it started off with Christianity, which then evolved into Chalcedonianism, which now today is known as Catholicism, Protestantism, and Eastern Orthodox Christianity. There are so many different principles to it. And their definition of what uniformity means, that is that there is one particular ideal, one particular ideology, one particular principle that is held to as infallible by the society or a large part of it. We understand that Christianity at its inception was exactly that uniform ideal. And the fact that there were people who did not conform to it, who believed that Jesus Christ, for example, had two different forms, a spiritual form and a flesh form. Those who believe in that led to a break away from the original text, from the original thinking, and from the original ideology. Conformity is not being ensured. In fact, it's the exact opposite. We understand that conformity is something which is being led to whenever an ideal is being held as infallible, as being held in a majoritarianism or a uniform way. And exactly that is what side opposition today says. I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions? Thank you, Rajbir. I would now call upon the leader of the opposition to sum up the arguments of his team. Atirek Bajpai.
A very good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Their second speaker today said that the principal speaker does this, the second speaker does this, and the third speaker does this. Well, ladies and gentlemen, their principal speaker, second speaker, and third speaker all failed to conform to that uniform principle of what they have to do, Let's begin now. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic today very simply says uniformity ensures. It does not say uniformity leads to something. Let's talk about this very fundamental difference and where side proposition today went wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, today when I say something ensures something, it means that something by its original virtue is resulting in something, not it leading to something. This debate by its virtue does not ensure whether we will win or they will win. Them speaking good or us speaking bad will lead to their victory. That is the fundamental difference between something that is ensured and something that leads to something. So, ladies and gentlemen, today, when the topic says that uniformity does ensure conformity and also mediocrity, their whole argument today has been just a plain and simple big conceit. Let's see what they came up with to prove this that. Today, they came up here and said and told us about Copernicus. How everyone had the uniform principle that Earth was the center of the universe. And Copernicus did not conform to that principle. Exactly, sir. Having a common principle does not ensure that everyone conforms to it, and that proves our entire stand. Ladies and gentlemen, today, when their third speaker, in such a very good tone, said, people think outside the box. True, that is the virtue of human beings. They think outside the box. So, ladies and gentlemen, the general consensus and the general principle is, in order to win a debate, you have to speak logically. But side proposition today thought outside the box, and they thought speaking illogically will result in their winning this debate. I give you this example in order to prove to you that even though, once again, a common principle exists, people will not, by the virtue of that common principle, comply to it. Very simply, because people think outside the box. That is why, because of our virtue of thinking outside the box, we will never always comply with the uniform principle. And that, once again, is a very big conceit. Ladies and gentlemen, today their whole debate has been about how non-uniformity leads to excellence. Okay, what does this sentence mean? What does this statement mean? When they come up here and say that non-uniformity leads to excellence, it implies that uniformity does not lead to mediocrity. Because being excellent is not mediocre, right? So today they had to prove that uniformity does lead to mediocrity, but they ended up proving that uniformity leads to excellence. So ladies and gentlemen, when talking about the second aspect of today's debate, which is mediocrity, they said that mediocrity is a minimalistic improvement. I told you that mediocrity is being average. There is a bar and you can be above the bar or below it. So improvement, when you improve, you automatically get above the bar. You are no longer the bar and you are no longer mediocre. So therefore, how can mediocrity be a minimalistic improvement? That is a very paradoxical thing and I cannot understand it. So ladies and gentlemen, I am a very big fan of the English language. And one of the greatest figures in the English language is a parody stroke. And one of my favorite parody strokes is, since light travels faster than sound, some people appear bright until you hear them speak. And with that, I'm very, 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 very proud to oppose. Thank you.
If you would sum up for the motion, sir.
So the number of times that principal speaker just said very was perhaps equal to the number of times they had contradictions in their stance. Let me prove to you how. So the principal speaker starts by saying that the definition of mediocrity is itself mediocre. And then he comes up with a quantification that mediocrity can be defined as average. A contradiction there. Secondly, they say in the principal speaker's speech that every human being is different because we are social animals. And then they say that uniformity can exist. Once again, a blatant contradiction. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, that the entire bone of contention they had against us was that we only talk about the causation and don't prove to you how it is ensured. Let me tell you that in my first speech, I clearly told you that uniformity guarantees conformity. I believe they didn't properly hear that statement. And understand, they say that the very fact that someone can think out of the box proves that uniformity does not ensure conformity. But let me tell you, whenever someone thinks outside the box, that breaks uniformity itself. You don't have uniformity. But as long as that person does not think out of the box, the belief remains intact. Conformity remains intact. And once a person thinks out of the box, uniformity is broken, and then conformity is broken. So when you don't have uniformity, you won't have conformity. That's the logic we propose to you. And also, ladies and gentlemen, you would note that mediocrity was hardly addressed by them. They hardly stick to the promise of their case. The first speaker says that they will address both the aspects, whereas the only thing they did argue was that we did not prove the guarantee, would only prove the causation. Well, I stand here in our sum-up speech to defy that entire line of argumentation that I think completely destroys the third speaker's speech and the sum-up speech. Because when you have someone thinking outside the box, uniformity is broken. And because uniformity is broken, you can't say that uniformity does not guarantee conformity. Now, one more very important clash which I deem to highlight in this particular debate is that the entire clash on mediocrity. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, that we need some sort of quantification for it. You just can't come up here and blatantly say that, oh, the definition of mediocrity is itself mediocre, and then say that it should be taken as an average. Are you going to sum up unquantifiable quantities and divide it by 3 or 4 and get the average? No, you can't do that. That's why we need an observable metric, and that metric was any significant improvement. Because if you do not improve, ladies and gentlemen, you remain mediocre. The third speaker himself stated this, because when he says that countries that don't develop are mediocre, he is stating the truth. Yes, countries, when they don't develop, are indeed mediocre. Exactly our point once again. Because if you don't improve, you are staying mediocre. You are not trying to better yourself. And that's exactly where our argument stands. And let me reiterate the point as to why we exactly think that uniformity not only causes but also ensures conformity. Because when you have a common set of principles, a common set of ideas, a common set of actions, there's very little incentive to deviate from them. And the moment someone stands up, uniformity is broken. Therefore, the entire third speaker's speech and the second speaker's speech, the first speaker's speech, the entire case falls flat on the face. And that debating trophy indeed belongs to us. Thank you.
Thank you. May I now call upon Shaurya Bansal to speak for the motion. The fourth speaker for the motion, ladies and gentlemen.
Am I audible? So, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to one and all present here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me point out what the first speaker of side opposition said, which refuted all the arguments brought up by side opposition. The first speaker said that human beings are social and hence they have different thoughts and ideologies. And then the second and third speaker went on saying that uniformity has to exist in the whole of society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when that first speaker himself came up here and said that human beings are social and hence they have different ideologies, how can we expect everyone to have the same set of uniform principles? What side proposition today simply argued was that when there is uniformity, there is conformity and there is mediocrity. However, side opposition has taken it as their duty to argue that uniformity cannot exist, which is outside the purview of today's debate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me give you an example of why uniformity leads to mediocrity. Let us take the Lucknow debating team, for example. They have had a uniform set of thoughts and ideologies which has led to their mediocre performance in today's debate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me move on to successfully deconstruct the arguments brought up by the first speaker. The first speaker said that uniformity is the Martinian principle, and the Martinian principle holds that we cannot be mediocre. However, ladies and gentlemen, the very fact that the Martinian principle exists and the very fact that the Martinian principle in fact is against uniformity, it actually goes against their said example. Moving on to their second speaker, who spoke about religion. He spoke about a time where society hadn't even been created. Ladies and gentlemen, side opposition has created a paradigm and taken us back thousands of years where there was no society, and hence when people had the same thoughts. They want us to debate a thought where people do not have their own thoughts and where society is exactly the same. However, that is not up for debate. So now, ladies and gentlemen, when they speak about religion and they speak about religious groups, they again gave the debate to side proposition. When we speak about religious groups, ladies and gentlemen, there is uniformity in those religious groups, and those religious groups have the same set of thoughts and ideologies. Now, when they are posed with religious problems or religious issues, they deal with their problems with the same thought process because they have uniformity in their thought process, and that is why they conform with their ideologies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to the third speaker who said that uniformity cannot exist. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what we see here is that they say that we are against the mediocrity, that all the countries are mediocre. However, understand that if there is no room for individualism, then this society cannot exist. They have presented a picture where society cannot exist because there is no room for individuals. What they are proposing is a system where the society in itself is a social, where the society in itself is a human being and society is one person. However, uniformity does not guarantee that, and with that being said, I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Do they take questions? No. Sir? No. Thank you. So now, Aryan Ahuja. No, the fourth speaker is Mark. No? Anybody can speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, there is one thing I want to remind you. There was a boy from La Martiniere, Calcutta itself, who scored a perfect 100 in his ISC. Well, and then, by the way, they defined mediocrity. If a person scores 100 in his ICSC, and then 2 years later, 100 in his ISC, well, he's a very mediocre student, because he hasn't improved. There has been minimal improvement. Well, their definition of mediocrity today has been minimal improvement. Well, if I say that there is a student, a mediocre student is one who gets between 40 to 60%. A person used to get 0 at one point of time. Now he gets 40. He is mediocre, but he has improved. Ladies and gentlemen, the most simple aspect of today's topic could not be understood by them. And that is why their arguments today were so mediocre. Well, today, as the first speaker, I had a number of examples about Christianity, about even an example about World War II. But judging by their logic and gauging their logic, I would use the very simple example of a box, which their third speaker used. Well, a principle, what uniformity is a box of principles. And a person can think outside the box. When a person thinks outside the box, he does not conform to the box. And therefore, uniformity does not ensure conformity because that person is not conforming to the uniform belief, which I think proves our point today. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they came up here and said, their principal speaker, that the role of my third speaker is to disapprove the arguments of side opposition. Well, he did that role very well. There was just one slight fault. He disapproved the arguments of side proposition instead of opposition. Because when he very proudly talked about Galileo and Copernicus and said, well, they proved that the world was round by circumnavigating the earth. Well, there was a uniform belief. The majority believed that the earth was round. What did he do? He did not conform to the uniform belief. He disapproved that. That is, uniformity does not ensure conformity. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I would say something. Well, we debaters are staying in a dorm which is quite far away from this hall. And I agree that to some extent, our arguments might have been illogical, yes. And if I took one step every time we said something illogical, I would have reached our dormitory by now. But if I took one step every time they said something illogical, I would have reached my dormitory in La Martiniere, Lucknow by now. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I permitted a few remarks while the judges are totaling? So first and foremost, I must congratulate both teams and both schools on a very high level of debate and speaking. I thought that the confidence, the delivery, and the attention to logic was quite exceptional. I must congratulate both teams. Great work. So, I don't know how many of you would get this reference but you know, what we have here is a number of sophisticated rhetoricians, fortunately not intoxicated by the exuberance of their own verbosity. I found it a little, well, innovative, strange, whatever, that when you're discussing uniformity, nobody used the examples of the uniformed services. So you did stick to your own uniforms in school. And I found it difficult to keep up because being highly educated used a lot of big words, which I'm not always comfortable with. But in conclusion, I'd say that I'm a bureaucrat, and I'm currently in the hospitality sector since I handle tourism. So what, because you were slightly didactic in both of you sticking to your own points, you missed the chance to follow the bureaucratic way and say, yes, but. So I think you addressed it at the end, Niloy, right? When you mentioned that uniformity is hypothetical. The point that after the discussion, what came across to me was that you cannot have uniformity in human society. You have to look outside human society. You could have looked at ants, for example, or bees. And if you were ultimately, this uniformity that you're talking about is a little like Schrodinger's cat or the light inside the fridge. It's entirely hypothetical, and you have to argue about it as a totally hypothetical construct which we don't see in human society. But very well argued by both sides, and I think the judges have a very tough job. The verdict. While we wait for the verdict, are there any questions from the House? Do we have a mic to go around there? Okay, so the host team are kind enough to guide me on this. Apparently, there is a tradition that if somebody from the House wants to come up and speak for a couple of minutes, they're free to do so. Is there anybody who wants to speak? So I can see three gentlemen on their feet. The gentleman in front is presumably the youngest, and so we should give him first pop. Good time, sir. Mind if we give you only 2 minutes each?
Right, so the opposition has come up here and literally asked us for examples where uniformity ensures conformity. So I just want to give them some examples. Whether it be Nazism, fascism, or communism, where the people are forced to follow, where the people are forced to be uniform under a single idea, it causes stagnation, which causes mediocrity, and which causes destruction, and therefore we should not promote uniformity. Countries like America, India, where people are allowed to have their own ideas, where people are not forced to be uniform, they can grow. They are actually able to grow further, and the opposition have some good speakers. They have some excellent speakers, which are very good in hiding their blank speech with their words, right? They don't have speeches. They just give some big words to confuse the audience, to confuse the judges. But we want to say that we are not going to be confused with that, right? It is clear that that our school, that LMB has clearly won this debate, and we will, and the judges will also prove to you how we have won this debate. Thank you.
Mr. Rafi, may I give it to temptation and respond to that? I mean, that was very rousing. I thought you'd end with, we will rock you. But when you mentioned the Nazis as an example of how uniformity ensures conformity and mediocrity, there are two names that refute your point. When you talk about conformity, Oskar Schindler. And when you talk about mediocrity, Erwin Rommel.
So good evening everyone, my name is Rishit Soni and I'm from La Martiniere for Boys, Calcutta, and I would like to speak on behalf of side proposition. Now let us understand that over here side opposition tried to show how the arguments of side proposition are redundant. But let us understand that, let me give you an example that 74 years ago, if the principals of both the schools, Calcutta and Lucknow, would not have come together to host the first Inter-Martiniere meet, thus breaking uniformity, thus breaking the uniform ways of working of the functioning of the schools, then we wouldn't have been sitting over here today. And that is the reason why we are sitting over here. That is the reason why uniformity does not show uniformity ensures mediocrity, and that is why we need to break uniformity in itself. Now let us also understand that after the industrial revolution, when capitalist countries grew, there were industries which crossed wage gap, which caused two classes, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. But then came the ideas of people like Karl Marx, who actually talked about equality, egalitarianism and equality before all. And although communism turned out to be a failure after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, even today the most developed nation, the capitalist democracies, could not help but acknowledge the fact that equality before all and reducing income inequalities is to be done. And that is how if these capitalist countries would have worked in the uniform way, then progress would have not been possible, then mediocrity would have still existed, then there wouldn't be any developed nations. And that is the reason why the arguments of side opposition fall flat on their face. Thank you.
Do we have the results, or do we have? Oh, we have. Oh, yes, of course. We must allow somebody from the visitors to speak.
Good evening, members of the House. I am from the Lucknow contingent, and I stand here firmly opposing the motion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's understand what the side proposition got wrong. They said that uniformity leads to conformity. But the topic clearly states that uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. And that's why the whole case falls flat on the face, and I'm very, very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Sir, do we have the verdict, please? Oh, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Inshal Abbas from Lucknow contingent, and I am here to play football. So, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking against the motion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what we need to understand that the side proposition today had no arguments but sarcasm, and they need some serious English lessons, because the principal speaker of this side proposition said the motion wrong. The only thing that the side proposition came up here and said that A leads to B. Now, ladies and gentlemen, they missed the word ensure. What is the meaning of ensure here? That in all the cases, ladies and gentlemen, X will always make certain that something will happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about that in every possible scenario, A will ensure that this will happen. What the side proposition completely failed to understand, and they kept on saying that trophy is ours, while these judges don't know how to judge. Why? Because they themselves have confined that yes, we have already won this debate. They are so smart, actually. So, now, ladies and gentlemen, another principle. The principle of... Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give an example, that is the example of planets. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a belief that in this universe, till Neptune, whatever, XYZ planet, I don't know, I am an economics student, frankly speaking. So, we have a belief that the universe exists only till X. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when a certain scientist, any scientist in this world explores that there is another planet beyond that breaks the uniformity, ladies and gentlemen. Hence, it leads, but it does not ensure. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to oppose the motion. Thank you. And may the best team win here and the judges to decide it. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe the judges have reached their verdict. Is that correct, sir? Madams? Oh, we have another speaker? Sorry, they're hiding in the wings. Welcome. And brevity is at a premium.
Hello. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am Shazim from La Martiniere, Lucknow. I'm going to express my views against the motion. Uniformity ensures conformity as well as mediocrity. Uniformity may sound good, but it is diversity and not uniformity which is attractive and enhances creativity. For example, a bouquet with all types of flowers are attractive, aren't they? Just tell me, do you have all the friends with the same nature, with the same physical appearance? No. Some crack jokes, some are serious, some are friendly, and some have a lot of attitude. So you have to understand that uniformity everywhere is not possible. The topic means that if you have uniformity, that is everything similar, then it may lead to conformity, which is everybody conforms to it or agrees with it, which leads to mediocrity, which is average efforts, no expertise, and anything at all. For example, if we are guided by a uniform and everyone abide by it, wouldn't creativity simply vanish? It would simply lead us to agree to common uniform ideas. How does that help us to think ourselves, to discover, to invent new things? So proposition just wasted their time by proving a baseless argument, which even they failed to do. With that, I would like to conclude my speech. Thank you.
It is my duty now to announce the verdict of the judges. Personally, I think the judges had the toughest job because I would have split it between both teams. However, in the opinion of the judges, and this must have been a very fine finish, the best speaker is Mohan Rajagopal. I think that chant was also a very good argument. And in the opinion of the judges, the motion has been carried. May I now request our honored guests to give away the prizes.
May I now request our chief guest to please hand over the trophies. First to the best speaker. Runners up, Lucknow. Let's please put our hands together for them. The winners, Calcutta.
I have a request. At the end of the evening, can we please have 3 cheers for a very good fighting team from Lucknow? Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! Well done, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to acknowledge the contributions of, may we have silence please, acknowledge the contributions of so many people and making this a grand success. Let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the chief guest and the moderator for sparing his valuable time and gracing the occasion, and the remarkable way in which he conducted and controlled the debate was truly commendable. My sincere appreciation to the judges, Professor Chandrani Biswas, Professor Dr. Shantapal, Mr. Sneshi Sood, for their wholehearted involvement and sparing their time and sharing their expertise. Thank you so much. I know it was a very difficult task at hand, but I'm so certain that you enjoyed the debate. My gratitude to the principals who very kindly provided us with the topics for the evening. Mrs. Caroline Lionel from Pratt Memorial School, Father Sebastian, who's with us from St. Lawrence School, and Mrs. Dayamanti Mukherjee of Modern High for Girls. Thank you so much to all of you. I would also like to place on record my gratitude to the members of the Board of Governors, Secretary, Mr. Dhar, Bursar, Assistant Secretary, Mr. Sarkar, for their valuable inputs and support. I'm also grateful to Mrs. Das and Mrs. Sarkar, the lady principals, for the encouragement and support. Mrs. Das was not there at the start of the event, but we want to felicitate you, ma'am. Thank you for being with us. To other principals and special invitees for their presence and sharing in our joy, thank you so much for being with us. To the members of ALMA for their unwavering support and the skills that they pass down to the younger Martinians. My gratitude to the esteemed secretaries, and that's Mrs. Dhal. Ma'am, are you here, please? Would you please stand? And Mr. Manas Dev. Let's put our hands together for them. They're the people behind the show, ma'am. Thank you so much. And Mr. Manas Dev, please come for the coordination, preparation, and your guidance. I don't know if you noticed, but there were some people over here who kept reminding us the value of time. Those who are timekeepers, Mr. K.N. Singh and Mr. Partho Datta. Thank you so much. And we're also fortunate to have an amazing support network of teachers who I can always rely on. My thanks to all the different committees who have worked so tirelessly and making this a grand success. I also wish to commend our camera club under the guidance of Mrs. Armstead. They've been working so hard, and Mr. Mentrell, and this whole event Also the live streaming was there. Well done, all of you. I express my gratitude to the sergeant steward and through him to our ancillary staff for the timely completion of the work and taking care of all the logistics. Ladies and gentlemen, most of all, because of whom we are here, I commend all the debaters. Let's put our hands together for these wonderful, wonderful orators. They displayed immense confidence and presented very rational arguments. Finally, we couldn't possibly go home without mentioning the encouragement we received from the audience. I think it was very thrilling, especially the boys and girls. You all were so well behaved, supportive, and encouraging your teams. Well done. Ladies and gentlemen, it was indeed a pleasure. May I now request you all to please join us for dinner in Martin Hall. Thank you so much.